Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. By watching this channel, you are accepting that the content on this channel is intended for educational purposes only. We strive to provide valuable information to help you enhance your technical understanding. We do not condone the use of pirated software. Please respect local copyright laws and support software developers by using legitimate purchased products. All testing conducted on this channel is done in compliance with the Consumer Review Fairness Act and the United States Fair Use Act under Copyright Law, Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act. We aim to provide honest reviews, security configuration tricks, tips, and how-tos. While we make every effort to deliver 100% tested solutions, we acknowledge that we don't know everything. If you have additional insights or corrections, please share them in the comments. Like and subscribe to keep up with the latest OS reviews and security tips. Your support helps us continue to provide valuable content. Thank you for being part of our community.
Hey there, subscribers. So guys, I wanted to jump back into this Chinese government edition of Windows 10. Now the last time we left this off is basically everything on it was Chinese. And it still is for the most part. I mean, if we jump in through our different various menus, we'll see that, we have quite a bit of Chinesium things written in here. So we do have quite a bit of the system is still showing us Chinese. Now, I wanted to go into the registry real quick and show you what we got going on. So we do have the languages under the NLS, and if anybody's curious, it's HK local machine system current control set control NLS and language. That's where we're going to find our actual language configuration. Now, default 0409, I just happen to know because I've been in the language system now for a little while in the system, is US English. So that matches what we have for our ENUS down here. But the problem is that our installed language is still showing up as Chinese. And if we go in here, we can actually see our default system language, our UI language is ZHCN, which is the Chinese language, which is 0804. So what do we know? We know that in our configuration here, or at least what I know at this point from going through this, is that while I could modify the registry configuration and add the NLS configuration for the correct ENUS settings, I can't modify the actual system. So on reboot, the system's PE will automatically reset the default language back to our configuration here, our ZHCN. So I started to wonder if I could change the international settings. So I did modify the international settings as well and set the country to US and did the configuration here based off of our HK current user value. So in other words, modified the user's configuration for our default user. Now, as you can see, obviously the language is configured for the keyboard, at least in English, where we can type in English to replace things. But when we drill down into the actual file structure itself, you'll see that we still have Chinese as our primary name for some of the structure. So what do, right? We know that if we plan on doing an upgrade, like an in-place upgrade where we grab the ISO file, we throw that inside the system, and we boot off the ISO file to make the changes to the system, it's just going to replace our Chinese edition with a standard edition, which doesn't really solve the issue of the security concern or the configuration, right? So we know that this particular operating system is far more secure than what our standard edition of Windows 10 Pro is. So if we wanted to maintain this operating system, what are some of the options that we could follow that we can maybe change the language of this? Because I can tell you right now, so I went through the whole process here of attempting to do registry modifications, DISM package adds, the removal of DISM, the addition of DISM, and everything and anything in between this configuration to try to get to the point where we would actually have access to change the language. So this is the culture that's currently installed. We can see it's ENUS, we can see it's English United States, we can see the LCID as 1033. So what do we get from upgrading? Well, we get the language, right? But what do we lose? We lose all of the configuration in this system. So if we want to really troubleshoot this and screw around with it, see what we can and can't do with this operating system, it would be nice to be able to read the language. So part of me is wondering if what we could do is just modify the actual naming convention. So we know that ENUS is our language pack, right? So this is the language pack of all the correct language configuration for our English settings. However, if we go into Windows and into System 32 on the system, we're going to see the various languages on the system. So part of me wonders if what we could do is maybe just grab the ZH language off of this thing, take all the guts out of it, and then paste the ENUS language into it, reboot the system, and have it come up with the correct language on the system. Because ultimately what we have as far as our registry is concerned is just a pointer pointing to this location. Now the PE obviously is going to be different, but I don't know if it reads from this directory and then it updates the PE, or if the PE dictates this to the directory. So if it turns out that it is the PE, then it's possible we might be able to modify the ISO file that created the Chinese edition and change the language pack on the ISO file to English and then reinstall the operating system with the English language. Okay, so first thing I wanted to do here is to just right click on this thing. I would do copy. Just right there, it's the C. And we do paste. That's our language pack. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the language pack itself on the system. I'm going to Control A this and then Shift delete it. Let's see if we can actually do that. So it appears so far we can't. Let's check this and then do a retry. See if it makes a difference. It does not. Let's skip this and see if it's just a constant flow of being blocked. So it is a constant flow of being blocked. So we can't shift delete the actual folder, but what if we take permission of the folder and grant ourselves full admin access to the folder and then take over the owner of the folder? Can we then shift delete it? Okay, so we're going to go to security, go to advanced permissions. And yeah, so right now we're set as trusted installer. Right now we are logged in as Frank. So let's give Frank full access and replace all the sub access to it and click on OK. So we've just given Frank full ownership of the folder. We're going to have to go back into this again and go back to permissions and advanced. And then we're going to do add. And we're going to select a principal. I'm going to do Frank again. And OK. We're going to give full control. And then OK. And we're going to apply this to all the subfolders. And click OK. And click yes. And then yes. Now I know what you're thinking. How did I know what those buttons meant? Honestly, I've done this so many times that I could probably do it even if there was no language there based off of the configuration. So let's go into this now and do Control A, Control, and then Shift Delete, and see if we can now delete it. No, we still cannot. So we'll have to check the ownership of these files to see if the file access ownership changed when we made the changes on the security of the actual folder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to right click on the file here. So that's the top file. We can see it. We go to properties. We go to security. Go to advanced. And we can see Frank is the owner. We can see Frank has full access. So we know Frank has full access and he's the owner. That means that this is locked by the actual system and cannot be processed while the system is live. Which makes me now wonder if perhaps what we do is we shut the system off, we mount the VHDX file, we access the location, we change the file. Okay guys, so we are now logged back in, but we're logged in now to a different system. As you can tell, it's full screen, right? This particular system is a 1803 Windows 10 system. And what we intend to do with this particular system is we mounted the VHDX file, or it's technically it's a VMDK because it's VMware, right? So we mounted the virtual file, and we're going to access this file through the secondary drive on the system, which is the E drive. And the reason why is because we want to specifically see if we can modify this language file that we couldn't access before. So if we go in here and we go to System 32, and we find this ZHCN file here, we're going to do Control A, and we're going to do Shift Delete. There you go. So we now deleted everything that was in there. Now let's go to our EN-US location. Now what do you guys think? Do you think it's possible that this will work? I want to hear it down in the comments if you guys think this is actually going to work. I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of up in the air as to whether or not this will work. I mean, theoretically, all the files are named the same. The pointer points to the folder. As long as we don't change the folder itself, we should be able to actually access it, right? So if I just paste the data in here from the EN-US location, hypothetically, when we boot this system up, since this data is now the English language, the system should boot up and read the information, because the system shouldn't know the difference between whether or not the ZHCN is containing files that are, you know, the English language, Japanese, Chinese, or, you know, anything in between. So let's now flip this back over to the other system. Let's boot it up and see if our language changes. So as you can see, we blue screened of death. Now the interesting thing is that even the blue screen of death is still in Chinese, so I'm going to assume this means that our language situation isn't resolved. Okay, so we're booting up again, but this time we're booting into the disk. I'm wondering if we could do a repair on this using an English version of the disk. So what I'm going to do is actually reboot this and pop in a 22H2 version. Actually, I think the system is based off of an earlier version, so I'll have to check the version. I'll pop in the disk for the earlier version. We'll boot it up again and see if we could add the English package that way during a repair. Okay, we're going to do a system repair here. And we might try a couple different things to see if we could resolve this issue, but resolve it and actually get the English language to work without adding all the additional features during an upgrade. So we're going to click on Troubleshoot to reset. Let's try the automated process, right? So we'll do Startup Repair. Select Windows 10 and see if Windows English version or the standard version can repair the Chinese version of the operating system. Okay, so that didn't take long. We got a startup repair error indicating that the startup repair couldn't repair our PC. Let's choose advanced options, see what other options we get in here that we could actually mess with this. So we'll go back into Troubleshoot. Let's see if we could do maybe a, let's see if we could do a restore, right? So that's interesting. So that means that Windows 10 Chinese edition, because we didn't make any changes, obviously can't understand the language. We didn't make any changes. It doesn't have a system restore or a system recovery partition or configuration in the actual operating system, which is actually kind of cool because that means it's more secure. I mean, obviously for things like this, that's self-inflicted. You know, it is what it is, but maybe we could try command prompt, see what we could get, access the PE, and see what we could do here. So if you guys need the command, so all you'll have to do is you'll just have to locate your local drive. Don't think that it's automatically going to be the C drive. Sometimes it could be the D or E. It really varies in the PE environment. Once you're in there, you're just going to do C Windows System32 dism.exe /image, and then you're going to choose the colon and whatever the drive is. So for mine, because of the D drive not being the location for where my actual disk or my operating system is installed, it's still C. It's just Windows System32, and then once you do that, you do C Windows System32 dism, and then /image :C : and then do /cleanup image /health check health rather, and then /scratch directory, and then :C : And what that'll do is it'll deploy the image servicing management tool, and it'll check for corruption of the operating system. So this is a way to actually attempt to fix corruption on your OS if you blue screen of death. Again, self-inflicted, right? So we knew that we were going to have an issue after we changed those files, or maybe we didn't. Again, this is really at this point just to see if we can change the language on this thing. And if we can't, then we can't. But, there's a bunch of different articles on the internet indicating different methods that people claim to have worked. I think we've debunked the possibility of changing that one directory by mounting the file and fixing the issue. So I would say that that's not a possible or plausible solution to this, because clearly we blue screened. Let's see if we could get into PowerShell. I don't know if PowerShell works through the PE. Yeah, we can't get into PowerShell. Can we just do PowerShell? Oh, no luck. Okay, so another possibility of a fix on this is to run the SFC scan now on the actual system. So let's see if we do that, if the system will actually check to see if those files are missing. And if they are, will it attempt to recover them from the disk? Will it attempt to recover them from the OS? Or will it just throw a hard error that there's files missing? Okay, so as you can see, it didn't make any changes. It didn't find any errors, any integrity violations, any issues whatsoever with the operating system. But clearly we're blue screening, right? And there's clearly an error code that we can't read because it's in Chinese. Now, again, I know for a fact it's because we changed the language files. But we're going to continue on to troubleshoot this to see if we could replace the language files without upgrading the operating system. So I have a version of 1803 popped in the disk tray, or the ISO connected to the system. We're going to actually attempt to use the WIM file to do a restore recovery of the actual operating system to see if we could resolve that issue. Now, in doing that, do you guys think it's going to upgrade the OS? Do you think it's going to keep it the same version? What do you think will take place? Okay, guys, so I cut the video. Now, I attempted for a long period of time to actually fix the image with updating the language files to the English version and replacing the Chinesium version with the English version with the actual image itself. And unfortunately, I just can't get it to work. And I think that's because it is a single image version, however, or single language version. However, I think that our next step here, based off of what the internet says we should do, is to use the Nlight software to create a package with the English language in it. Now, keep in mind, this is a single language version, so technically speaking, it ships with Chinese and it should only contain Chinese. However, right now, what I'm doing at this point is just going through the things that we find on the internet that gives us information on what we can do to actually correct the issue, with multiple thumbs up indicating that that does correct the issue or it does work. Now, obviously, the internet is always 100% realistic and truthful, so all of these things should work without an issue right out of the box. But as we could see, somebody might have just been misinformed. I don't see a way that we could actually continue to run the Chinese version in Chinese if we only speak English. That's one. Two, upgrading clearly won't work because it'll just rewipe the configuration and make it just as unsecure as the regular version. And then three, deleting the files and replacing the files with the English language version clearly doesn't work. We can't use PowerShell to put the English language back into it. So what I wanted to do is I actually installed, now if you don't know or you haven't used it before, this particular software is made by a company called Nearsoft. It's N-I-R-S-O-F-T. It's actually called Blue Screen View. So what I did is I actually mounted our configuration files, our E drive, which you can see the memory dump file here, which is our blue screen of death error. And what we could do is we could use the Blue Screen View software to actually view what the error is. We could see that the error comes back as a critical process died. And then we could see the version, the major version, the minor version. We could see the actual dump size, the date that the dump file took place. And then we could see the dump check or the bug check code and then the parameter. So we could see what's in the actual dump file. Now, if you don't know what the software is, it's really helpful if you're in an environment where you're running anything that's newer than like Windows XP, where they had the dump check software built into it. And you can use the developer tools built into Windows to pull the same information, but the truth of the matter is the Nearsoft program is really small. It works. It'll read the core information that you need to read, so you can pull back the information for your blue screen of death without having to jump through hoops. So I'd definitely check this out if you don't know what this is. It's just Nearsoft's website. It's nirsoft.net, and it's called Blue Screen View. Okay guys, so this is the error that we get from our actual bug check. We could see the 0xEF, we could see the critical process died, which we were able to pull with the Nearsoft software. This is Microsoft's website. And if we scroll through this, we could see the resolution, we could see the general troubleshooting tips, and you'll see that we have SFC scan now, which is something we already did inside the image, was not able to correct it. So we know that this error was caused by us changing the language files on that particular version of Windows. So I think at this point, let's just scrap this image and let's roll to an image that does work, and let's create a maybe an Nlight package with the English language attempted to be injected in the package from the installation process state. And then let's reinstall the operating system to see if we get the English language. Okay guys, so I didn't want you to have to sit here and go through the entire process with me, but what I did was I actually went through the process of importing the language files directly into the ISO file and removing all of the Chinese language files from the ISO file itself. Okay, so we see that we get a warning and an error message indicating that the package revision here is not supported by this particular version of Windows. So what I'm going to need to do now is I'm probably going to need to locate the 2016 server package for this system and import that language package, because it appears that this particular revision, even though it says it's 1803, it's not. It looks like it's actually version 1703. Because it's Enterprise version, or Enterprise G version, which specifically is the government edition, which is not the same as the revision that would have been 1803. So let's see if we could find the language packages for the older version and see if we can import those. Well, on a long shot, I did find an older version, which unfortunately also does not work. So we're going to have to find the language specifically to this particular build. Again, we could see that it shows that it's 1803 in the actual build data, but it's not 1803. Ironically, we can install the 22H2 rollups of the language edition into the system, but we cannot install the language pack for the English edition for 22H2 for 1803, and it appears also not 1709. So we're going to have to see if we could find the one for probably, I'm hoping an older version, but I don't really know specifically. Because unfortunately, it seems like this particular product is a variation of build numbers. Now we could see down at the bottom right hand side of the screen down here where we could see 10.0.17134.1, which obviously this is older than this one is. So we could see if we could find that later revision, and maybe that's the key here in order to add the English language to this build. Okay, so we could see that our cab installation of our actual language pack failed. We can see it with the red dot. Now, something to keep in mind is that this particular revision, because it is Enterprise, is technically LTSC, which I believe is 2019 edition, which should be the same as actual 1809 in Windows Server 2019. So what I'm going to attempt to do is actually download the core offline language pack for Server 2019, and we'll see if we can import those license or languages directly into this WIM. Now, it's a long shot, but technically the build number of this version, this 10.0.17134.1, really only exists in this version. So in order to get this to work, we may have to see if we could use outside resources, not technically designed for this particular revision of Windows, but maybe we could import 2019 servers edition of the language packs into this actual build. So now at this point, what you could see is that we do have the English language at least loaded into our Chinesium edition here. However, we're still missing the ENUS language pack, which is the one thing that we're missing that we need to install. Hopefully, what we'll be able to do here is add the English language pack from 2019 server to our Windows 10 G Enterprise version at 1803. We can see the build number down here by the clock. We could also see that this is particularly the Chinese edition if I dip back into our image here. So there you go. We could see our Windows 10 Chinese edition here that is loaded That is our particular loaded operating system. Now you can see also that we have the English edition loaded down here, the ISO file available, which I did rip the WIM files from the English edition, and I have the Chinese edition loaded. And again, we could see the Chinese edition now has the ENUS language packs installed. So let's see what happens if we add the 2019 edition of the language pack to this, if we can then write the ENUS to the actual image. Okay, so we got the 2019 language pack now added. You can see it all here on the added side. Whether or not these will actually apply is to be seen, because again, this is 10.0.177631, and we're looking for 10.0.17134.1. So revisions are still newer on this side. We could see that on our installed container side. We are also running, the vast majority of these things are going to be the 17134. We can see that we have the 203, which is the typing and the other language packs here, which again, I believe that's from actually 22H1. I don't know that it's from 22H2, and I don't know that it's from 21H2. I think that's from 22H1. Let's see if we can install these language packages on this build, or if we get another error, let's go from there. Okay, so the process is now actually applying whether or not these will work. Again, we're seeing skipped, so that means that they're not going to work on the installation. However, this doesn't mean we're dead in the water. I think what we're going to do now, since we know that this is not going to work, that it's going to skip all of these installations, is we're going to create our own cab file based off of the ESDs. So basically, I could take an XML file configuration, change the header and the footer of the information in there, and we could save it as an ENUS language cab file from 1803, and try to import that directly into the system to see if we could actually change the language. Okay, so unfortunately, this thing really does not like my customized file. It's because it's not signed, obviously, and I'm guessing that the NT-Lite or N-Lite, or whatever you want to call it these days, doesn't really like the non-signed file or the self-made cab file for the ENUS language, and throws an error and doesn't allow me to actually use it as a supported file. So using customized cab files for the sake of this doesn't seem to work. However, we're not out of the we're not stuck in the woods yet, I guess, as they would say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an ESD file for the original build data from the preview, and grab that and change the ESD to an ISO file, mount that, and see if we could extract the language files from the original build data that this would have came from. Now, I believe the ENUS version is the same build number of 17134 dot, but I think that the ENUS version is .5, whereas the Chinese edition is .1. Now, keep in mind that the LTSC version still has all the crap added to it. The government version for China did not get the garbage added to it. And yes, we could go through the LTSC supported version and strip probably most of the stuff out of it and do it that way, but I really don't want to do that. I really, for the sake of this video, want to see if we could actually inject the English language into this thing. So let's give it another shot and see if that works. Okay guys, so I ripped the ESD file to an ISO file. Then I ripped out of the ISO file a command logic through DISM++ to pull additional resources out of the actual installation, the executables. I used the media creation tools, and I used the volume licenses location that I have access to for my certifications. And I was able to pull the cab files for the CU, or the build of the original government edition, using the Enterprise Edition 2021, which again is 17.17134.1. So we have the language pack now. Hopefully, when I click next here to actually apply this and finish it, it'll allow us to write this to the ISO file. At which point, let's install this ISO file and see if we have English language on our Chinese government edition of Windows 10. Okay, so to save space, I didn't install or run the ISO file yet. Let's see if this actually finishes and does the apply to apply this to the actual WIM. And if it does, at that point, I will write this to an ISO file, and then we will get through the process of trying to do the install. Well, good news, guys. It did finish. It did apply. So now let's rip the ISO file and see if we could boot off of it. Okay, guys, so we're going to create the ISO file, but before we do so, we could see now that we do have the ENUS language pack installed, and we see that we have the ENUS language associated configuration installed. So at this point, once we create this file, we should be able to mount it, boot off of it, install the operating system, and it should be in English. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Let's jump into that next part. Okay guys, so we're booting for the first time. And as we could see that the WIM at least didn't work for the boot portion of this thing because it's still in Chinese. Okay, so we're doing the installation now of the actual operating system. And obviously still in Chinese, but that doesn't necessarily make or break our situation. So once the operating system loads, if we then have the English language as the default language, I would still call this a win, because at least then we could go through the troubleshooting processes and take a look at the operating system to see what features and functions really differ between it and our traditional American versions. So it appears that the installation is corrupted on the install process. And we get to a certain point, and then it borks an error. It indicates that the system cannot continue. I'm assuming that's what it says. Again, I can't read. Interestingly enough, this is in English, but the checkboxes are not, right? So I can't read. So we do have partitions in here. We can see that. Let's use that one. We'll go through this again and see if it actually does this again, but I assume it's going to do it again, that we have some kind of error in the operating system. So I don't know if you guys want to throw something down in the comments and let me know what you think. If there's anything else you want me to try to see if I could get it to work, I will gladly do that. But if this throws an error again, I think that's where we end this video. And we'll pick up the next video in hopefully attempting to do this again with maybe some additional comments or thoughts that you guys have down in the comments as to maybe seeing if it's possible in a different way. We could also spin up the LTSC CU edition to see if we could modify that edition to match the government edition, the Chinese government edition. But I was really trying to use the out-of-the-box configuration that Microsoft provided and inject the English language. So that way we could roll forward in this and actually take a look at what is shipped as the operating system. Even if not to use it, but really just to see the main differences between the operating systems. And yeah, once again, we got the error message. So again, leave something down in the comments and let me know if you guys have any thoughts on anything else that we could do here. Okay guys, so at this point, I really should stop, right? We should just regroup as a group, figure out what we want to take as our next steps to figure out specifically how we're going to go about trying to get this as a single language, or if it's even worth it. So at this point, I know that it looks like it's about 30 minutes in the video, but we're going on probably 3 days of actual on and off work just to look to see if this is possible to do the investigation into the OS, to find all the packages, all the cab files, and everything else. Now, it's all pulled from Microsoft's Windows site, the update catalog, just like I would have pulled the stuff for XP or Windows 7 and all the other stuff. It all exists on there. Even the Chinese editions updates all exist on there. So the versioning differences and all that stuff, all those KBs are on that actual website. Now, with that said, what I decided to do here is I decided to reset the ISO file, go back to the default configuration, inject the additional language packages into that other edition. Then we're going to try to do the install and see if we can, at that point, use the DISM commands to actually change the language once we're in the OS. Well, guys, as you can see, getting through the installation process appears to be in English at this point. Okay, guys, so we're in Windows 10, the Chinese government edition now, in our modified ISO file where the language file was added. We didn't make any other additional system changes. So we're going to go to Start. We're going to see English. So at this point, I would call this fixed. We have English as the language in the Chinese edition of Windows 10, the Windows 10 Government Edition. And we are specifically looking at English wording and lettering. Let's go into our C drive now and let's see if we could... Yeah, so we do have name. Everything in our command line is the correct language. Everything in the start menu is the correct language. Everything here is the correct language. I don't see anything anymore that is showing as the Chinese edition language. So we were successfully able to add the English language as the default language into the Chinese edition of Windows 10 for Chinese government. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this back as a secondary video with how to do this in a shortened way, which should release sometime next week. But for the time being, what I'll also do is down in the description, I'll let you know specifically what the revision is you have to get. And if you follow the wiki, you can get into the wiki page and you should be able to pull the URL that goes directly to the Microsoft catalog to grab the language file. And at that point, I mean, it's just as simple as adding the language file through the update section, and that's it. Reboot the system, get into it, and you have the English language as the language into your Chinese government edition of Windows 10. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for sticking it out with me. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know down in the comments if you have any other suggestions, thoughts, or wanted to see anything in addition. We will dig through this operating system now that we can read it in English and check out specifically what the differences are between this and just an 1803 or really even an LTSC version of Windows 10. Thanks again, guys. Catch you on the next one.